Abraham ben Samuel Abulafia was born in Saragossa, Spain in 1240 CE. He was raised as an Orthodox Jew during the Convivencia. His father died when he was 18. Then he and his family moved to Toledo. 2 years later, he decides to make a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. He was only 20 at the time. He had the spirit of an adventurer. He ends up on the coast of Palestine in a place called Acre. He wasn't allowed to actually visit the Holy Land because the Crusades were occurring at this time in history. So he travels to Greece instead, where he meets and marries his wife and spends about 10 years there. Then he moves from Greece to Capua in Italy. He did this because he was searching for someone to teach him the Kabbalah. His trip to Italy isn't successful, so he returns to Spain and goes to Barcelona. While in Barcelona, he receives his prophetic call. God reveals to him that the Messianic age is coming. So Abulafia starts preaching to anyone who'd listen that the Messiah is coming. This causes a lot of trouble with the Jewish authorities. Eventually, he comes across the Sefer Yetzirah. The version of the book that he found had a commentary written on it by a man named Baruch Tagami. Abulafia seeks him out. Eventually, Abulafia writes a spiritual autobiography. It's called The Hidden Treasure Garden. In 1280, his prophetic call demands that he go to Rome and confront the Pope about the Messianic age. The Pope at this time, Nicholas III, was highly anti-Semitic. Nicholas III was warned of Abulafia's trip to Rome and prepared special accommodations for Abulafia. Upon his arrival, he was to be arrested and burned at the stake as soon as possible. By the time Abulafia was only a day away from Rome, everything in Rome was ready for him. The firewood was cut and piled up, and the guards were waiting to arrest him as he entered the city. This night was on the eve of the Jewish New Year. That night, Pope Nicholas III died. Abulafia regarded this as a miracle. Everything in Rome was in turmoil. Abulafia was not going to be burnt at the stake. Abulafia was still seized upon entering Rome. He is only imprisoned for 28 days, and then he's set free. He then goes to Sicily because he isn't allowed to stay in Rome. While in Sicily, he writes very detailed works on Jewish mysticism, about 6 books in total. He was also happy to teach anyone of any religion how to practice his method of Jewish mysticism. He also wrote the book of permutations. This book would be the key element to his system. More on this later. He was still prophesying the arrival of the Messiah. In 1280, he says the coming of the Messiah is imminent. We're not entirely sure if he thought he was a Messiah or not. Jewish authorities are completely horrified at this prediction. So they get Abulafia out of Rome to somewhere safe, where he can't stir up any more trouble. They send him to the very remote island of Comino in 1285. Not a very pleasant place to live by no means, and eventually dies there around 1291. Abulafia produced the Way of Letters. His method of mysticism involved taking words, phrases, verses, names, and meditating and permutating them. He would rearrange the letters of words into combinations of things we didn't know existed. But since they existed in these strange arrangements of letters, they did exist in some mystical way. We would then release the letters to merge with all the other letters of the universe, and thus with God. We should permutate these words until the mind can no longer make sense of the word. This is what eventually releases the word. Abulafia concentrated on the 22 paths or pipes that connect the Sephirot in the Ein Sof. All the pipes are the creative forces, and they are all linked. Therefore, meditating on one letter or pipe allows you to eventually experience all the creative forces. After much meditation, one can release the words into Ein Sof, and you yourself enter Ein Sof.